My name is Mary Hanlon. I'm a visual artist based in Dublin. My current work is video installation and sculpture, but that hasn't always been so. I had been painting for quite a long time, essentially abstract painting, quite formal, quite geometric really. And I suppose I wanted to do something else. I think I possibly felt that painting for me had become too static, and I wanted to make something else. I was interested in working with Rona Clark, who's a composer, and we had many conversations about working together, but for a long time we didn't know what form that would take, what we could possibly do together. It certainly wasn't going to be paintings and music. It had to be something more organic than that. And just slowly over the years I moved off the wall, that's how I describe it. I suppose I would say that at a certain point I became very aware of what was happening in the world, what was happening around me, and the need maybe to reference that in some way in the work that I made. That would be a new move because, you know, abstract art is really not referring to anything except itself. And here I am now commenting in some way on things that are happening. And the more time has gone on, certainly over the last number of years, I feel I'm absolutely in the right place, because what's happening around me, it just calls out some kind of comment. I would still be very much inclined to say that the work is about art. You know, first and foremost, it's art. It has to work as a piece of art. Yes, it comments on something that's happening in the world, but it remains a piece of art. And I think in that sense, there really is very little difference between what I was doing when I was painting and what I'm doing now in terms of the form of the work. It still almost has an abstract feel to it, except that now it's commenting on various issues, various things that are going on. The most recent work that I've made is a piece called Last Act, made in collaboration with composer Rona Clark. I see it as a work that we have produced equally. Rona's name is on this work as well as mine, because I feel that her contribution is equal to mine in this work. The visual part of it is, it's essentially looking at weather, because I suppose I felt that weather is the place where most people are aware that something is changing now in relation to it. It's about climate change. And weather is something that affects us all. You know, we have storms, we have extremes of wind and so on and so on. We have wildfires, and we're hearing about this. So I suppose maybe we're more aware of climate change through weather and weather reporting than we might be, for example, through biodiversity or other areas. So I wanted to make a piece about climate change, and I knew from the outset that that I would make it with Rona, and that it would be a choral sound that Rona would use. And you might ask, well, why did I think choral sound? I wanted human voices, and I wanted human voices at their most sublime. Rona had worked previously with State Choir Latvia. They're a professional choir based in Riga, in Latvia, and they had actually recorded a whole CD of Rona's choral music. And listening to that CD and the quality of their singing, I felt this is the sound that I want for this project. The piece opens with unusually, 3 doorways. They're like industrial doorways. They all move differently. They open at the very start of the piece. At the end, these return and they close. I think some people might wonder why I did that, because it's not related to weather in any way. And yet it is, in a certain sense, I suppose. I feel that this reference to our industrial past and present, in a way, is really linked with emissions, which are the cause of climate change. And that's why I wanted that reference in the work. I suppose I also had the idea, when you look at these doors opening and closing, it's theatrical in a certain sense. They look like stages with curtains opening or whatever. And the theatrical world is an unreal world. We sit in the audience and we watch something on stage that reflects our reality but isn't real. And I suppose I feel that's, to some degree, our attitude to climate changing. We know it's happening, but it's sort of in the future. It's not right now. And so I just wanted that sense, and that's also why I called it Last Act. I wanted that reference to theatre and endings and so on. I think that some people might feel it's a gloomy piece, and to some degree it is, because it is talking about endings. But I prefer to think of it as a piece about urgency of time more than anything else. And listening to curators talking about artists making work about climate change, I hear again and again them saying that there has to be hope. And I'm thinking of my piece in that context, and perhaps they would look at that and think there's no hope in this. There's a sense of almost finality at this point. But I don't think actually that that's the case. As I said, I think it's more about time, urgency than anything else. And I feel that if the message is too hopeful, then we do nothing. We don't change our behaviours. We just carry on as we have done before, because changing our behaviours is not easy. Giving things up is not easy. So I'm not apologetic for making something that is dark, though I'd like to think that it has a seductive element as well, the feeling of abstracting the images almost, that it's seductive, so it draws you in to thinking about this and hopefully remembering it afterwards, and especially in combination with the sound, so that it would stay in the mind, and yes, it would affect us. And I'm very much with Mary Robinson when she says, be afraid, and don't soft pedal it, because really we don't have the time to soft pedal it now. It's upon us. We have to do something. For myself, you might say, what have I done? Well, the first thing in relation to the work, it was made sustainably, and what I mean by that is that I travelled as little as possible. I photographed about half of the footage in the piece, and I photographed all of that in my own area in Dublin, just up the road, down the road. I was astonished at what I was able to find that was useful for this piece. There were 2 trips involved. Rona went to Latvia, and really that was impossible to avoid because of the way she made the sound for this work. It was written first in chunks of music, not a single piece starting at the beginning and going to the end. She wrote segments. And then when she went to Riga, she worked with the choir and the conductor to make adjustments to those segments so that they would better fit the voices and then the project. So when she returned, then she made adjustments. She also added in additional sounds like the drum beat, like the bell, the tolling bell, and so on. So that was one of the trips that was made. And the only other trip was my visit to Galway to photograph the Corrib. It was the only place that I could think of where I would get really fast moving water. And so apart from those 2 trips, really, there was no travel involved. And we used existing footage. I was given some images by people, and what I couldn't get, I bought. And I think it was important to make a project about climate change that didn't involve me going to the Arctic or the Antarctic or whatever. What's wonderful about having this opportunity to show in the MAC is that in addition to the piece Last Act, I have the opportunity to show again some works relating to water that I made for an exhibition in Dublin. It was commissioned by Sheena Barrett for the lab in Dublin. And the title of that show was Water, More or Less. I suppose I'm very interested in the subject of water, and I suppose that show came out of three very simple concerns. First of all, the realization that Earth's water is limited. We only have, less than 4%, but perhaps even less than 3% of all the water on the planet is drinkable fresh water. All the rest is salt water. So that's number one. Secondly, that Earth's population continues to increase and increase rapidly. I know the predictions are that will change later in the century, but for now, the population is expanding and expanding. And water is used absolutely for everything, not just to keep us alive and to keep every living thing alive, but also for manufacture, for everything that's made. The amount of water required is really huge. So that's the second. And thirdly, the most worrying for me and the least obvious is that we are now overpumping the groundwater. The water deep in the ground in the aquifers is being used for daily need, for irrigation and so on. And you might think, well, what's the problem? We have loads of water down there in the earth. We have. But if we use it beyond a certain point, nature cannot recharge it. And so we're out of balance with water, and the well literally runs dry. Those aquifers will not refill, and every living thing requires water. So if we allow the water to deplete in the aquifers, we have nothing. So there were my three concerns, I suppose, really, out of which the various works that I made for the lab were made. There is a piece called Cut Off, which involves a row of taps, and there's a flow from each tap with a knot on it. And I'm thinking, I suppose, of future water where we turn on the tap and we don't think about it right now. We turn on the tap, the water flows out, but perhaps we will get to a stage where we turn on the tap and nothing flows out, or we will be restricted in when we can get water through our taps. I suppose, the subject is very serious, and to some degree, that work has a kind of tongue-in-cheek bit of humour about it. It's, as I said, it's a serious subject, but there's a side to me also that likes to play, and I think you probably see a little bit of that in that particular work called Cut Off. And also, perhaps too, in the piece called The Water You Drink. And I did a bit of research on this, and people are shocked when I tell them that toilet-to-tap water is a reality in the world today and will become even more so. We clean all the water we used. Not everybody has the luxury of a fresh water spring in their back garden. So what comes through our taps is cleaned water, water that has been sourced from rivers and lakes and put through a cleaning process, sent eventually to end point of use. But for some people, even today, the water that's used and the water that's flushed away down the drains and from the toilets is put through a cleaning process and then gets a further stage of cleaning and is routed directly back to endpoint use. And that's toilet to tap drinking water. And so I wanted to make a work about that. And the piece is the water we drink will pass through 7 pairs of kidneys before it reaches yours. And it includes wall text, which says exactly that. A glass unit that has fresh water on one side and urine on the other, and then a table with a jug of water and glasses, which is a kind of invitation to the visitor to have a drink of water and enjoy it. So to some degree too, it's a very serious notion, but the work has a kind of playfulness about it, which I like. And then the last piece, Water More or Less, it's a two-part work really, and one part is not something I regard as an artwork. It's really a piece of research, and that's the piece that's on the screen on the monitor there, called Drinking the Ocean. It's about desalination and taking salt out of seawater to make it drinkable. Something that will, I suppose, happen to a greater degree as we move forward in the 21st century. I knew nothing about desalination apart from what the word meant. And I did a slight bit of research among friends, and I asked all of them what they knew, which was pretty much the same as what I knew. So I decided to do a bit of research and put that research into a video. What is it? Where does it happen? What does it look like? How much does it cost? What does it produce? And so on and so on and so on. So that's essentially what that video is about. It's less than 12 minutes, about 11 and a half minutes long. And going hand in hand with that is a very tiny artwork. It's a piece called Silver Bullet. It was made with a real bullet. I took out the capsule, and instead I had a glass capsule made into which I put desalinated water from the Irish Sea, and I set that back into the bullet case. So that's on display. I regard that as the artwork, and I regard Drinking the Ocean as a piece of research. And the silver bullet, I suppose, really it's a phrase that we use every day when we're asking if something is a solution. We tend to say, well, this will be the silver bullet, or perhaps can it be the silver bullet, or whatever. Is this going to offer a solution? At the time that I made that work for the lab, we in Southern Ireland were considering 3 different options to solve our water problems, because the east of the country didn't have enough water now, especially with the rise in population. So we were looking at 3 things. One was to bring water from the Shannon. Secondly was to build a desalination plant. And thirdly was to recycle water. And since I've made that work, the government have decided on bringing water from the Shannon to solve the problems on the water shortages in the east of the country. I'd hate to think that my work is preaching, but nonetheless, I am also very, very aware that we have to make changes if we're going to survive on the earth. So yes, I suppose I'd like to think that the work would affect people in some way, and we all make different changes. We all contribute something, and my change isn't your change. I'll have to say for myself, because people watching this might say, well, what are you doing? What am I doing? One of the things that I'm doing that absolutely hurts me the most is to cut back on my open fires, which I absolutely love on winter days. I like nothing better than a coal fire, and on the cold days in winter. Last winter, I didn't light more than 5 fires during the entire winter, and that was a severe cutting back for me and a sacrifice. I try to use public transport wherever I can. I eat less meat. I love meat, but I'm now eating less. And there are some of the changes. They're not nearly enough, but there are some of the changes that I am making. And I don't feel that I can make this work and not offer something myself. So I'd like to think that people would remember the work. It would stay in their mind, and it might move them a little towards making some change in their lives.